Hi folks, welcome back to Vibe and our series on the Context Bonsai plugin creation. We're creating an OpenCode plugin that allows the LLM inside of OpenCode to look at its entire conversation context. And if there's anything in that context that is no longer relevant or maybe very unuseful, maybe it read a file that was huge and it really didn't need everything out of it, it can take that and remove it from the context and replace it with something much smaller, a small summary, a few keywords. And that allows us to preserve the context window so that it doesn't fill up and sort of dilute the context. And it also makes it so that we avoid the auto compaction that happens when the context gets too large so that it fills up and the LLM stops working. So we're avoiding auto compaction. We're also trying to make smart compaction choices that are selected with specific parts of the conversation rather than trying to compact the entire conversation. In addition to that, we're using this plugin on side projects actively to find issues with the plugin that we need to resolve. All of the functional issues with the plugin are pretty much resolved. What we're doing mostly now is fine-tuning the instructions of the plugin so that the LLM understands how to use it better. So that's what we're doing today. Let's jump into some stuff. All right. It just flipped for some reason. Let's see. So here is the primary desktop where we're working on the plugin as well as on OpenCode itself. So in the past couple of sessions, we've been trying to make a process so that the changes that we have to make to actual OpenCode separately from the plugin, it's changes that OpenCode needs that are required for our plugin to work at all. Those changes are going to have to get reapplied routinely as OpenCode is developed. It keeps on changing, and our changes need to be adapted to those new changes. So we're making a process, sort of a meta plan that an LLM can follow, and it can fetch the latest version of OpenCode and replay our changes on top of the latest version. So we've been iterating on that the last couple of sessions. Now I have sort of a loop that I go through that we've done a couple of times, and now that I've identified that loop and how it should work, I've told it to the LLM. So here's what I've said. We need to, 1, get the working tree back to the original state. 2, update the meta plan using the planning.guidance.md process. That's our document that describes how we like our plans to be generated. 3, get a subagent to use the meta plan to create a concrete plan. So the deal is here, the meta plan is how to create a new implementation plan. The implementation plan has very specific details about which commits we're going to be doing. So in order to create the concrete plan, we need to fetch the latest upstream changes, identify the commit that is the new one that we're going to be basing stuff off of, identify the starting point where we were when we started, what commit have we been working on in OpenCode, and also identify each of the individual commits that we've made for the Context Bonsai plugin so that those specific commits can be replayed on top of the latest one. So that's taking the meta plan and making it into a concrete plan. So that's the step 3. Then 4, orchestrate the new concrete plan while observing problems. And then 5, evaluate the meta plan effectiveness. I'm going to add a 6th step here, which is incorporate the learnings back into the meta plan. Oh, actually, not quite. Then we're going to be back at step 1, get the working tree back to the original state, and then update the meta plan using the planning.guidance process. Okay, so actually, I want to go back to that statement and what we learned in the previous loop. Okay, so that's the overall loop. I told it this whole thing once, except for this modification I just made, and it went through that whole process. It made the meta plan. Let's see. It created a concrete plan from the meta plan using subagents. It reviewed the concrete plan. It doesn't look like it actually orchestrated the concrete plan, come to think of it. What I'm looking at here, I see, yeah, here's where it's wrapping up its changes to the meta plan. Here's where it generates a concrete plan. Oh, execute concrete rebase plan. That's interesting. What did this do? How did it do it? Let's see. Okay. It did launch a developer subagent, and it gave it the concrete plan, which is this file right here. Okay, so it did. It did actually do the right stuff. And it learned some stuff after that. So here's what it says happened. It reset the working tree to the original baseline. It updated the meta plan using planning guidance, and it says the outcome of that process, because that planning guidance doc describes a process where you make the changes to the plan or you create a new plan, and then you take the plan and you use subagents to validate certain aspects of it. So it's telling us those aspects were given a pass by the subagents, and it gave an outline of the changes that it made to the plan. And then it says it had a new subagent create the plan, and then it orchestrated the new plan and observed the failures. And here are the biggest issues that it observed. It listed these things. Right now, I'm not even going to pay attention to this, because what I'm going to do is sort of send this through a loop, doing these things over and over again until it feels that the plan is ready and ready to be used, like now and in the future. This should work on the current upstream changes, and it should also work a week from now, a month from now. Anytime OpenCode makes new changes, we should be able to take our changes and apply it to the latest. So I'm going to have it go through this loop, but I'm also going to have it keep a log of all the things it changed. And in the end, I'm going to ask for a description. I'm actually going to have it write a narrative about all of the things that it identified, like what happened, what were the circumstances, and how did it fix it. So actually, I'm going to say 6. Actually, let's say after orchestrating the new plan, after evaluating the plan, okay, that's when I want it to 6 updates devlog.md with what was changed in the meta plan and what observations were made. There. Now it's going to continuously update a log. So this is just going to go on a forever loop. And it should proceed until it's satisfied. Now I'd like you to go through this loop, slightly modified as follows. Until the concrete plan can be executed without issues. There. I'll just say continue. Well, yeah, I think that makes sense. It should be able to understand that and just continue this loop. Okay. Yep, I like that. Okay, so now this process should, in the end, produce a new meta plan that we can use anytime we need to update everything to the latest of the upstream OpenCode. So that's this part. Now that's the places for this plugin where we're modifying OpenCode directly to support our plugin. And in this other window, I have an LLM session where we've been developing the plugin part of it separately, which is a separate code base that we can plug into OpenCode and get OpenCode to use this plugin. So yesterday I thought we were pretty much done, but I have been experiencing a few issues that I do want to resolve. I want to update the plugin. I made a note about it here. Oh yeah, yeah. It keeps making poor pruning choices, meaning we will have a very long session. Lots of things will have happened, and ideally, it's been pruning all along, and there's really old stuff. Anything that's really old has been gone. But what's been happening is old stuff has been accumulating, and it gets up towards high-ish context window percentages, anywhere from 40 to 60%. And that's when it decides it's time to prune. And instead of pruning the very old stuff, it prunes something more recent, and it's been pruning things that it actually needs to continue its task, which is very bad. So we need to clarify the instructions there. So I'm going to just have the instructions say that it should evaluate all of the contents in the window and evaluate based on two things. Um, how useful will this be, or how necessary is this content for the continued operation? And how much, how many tokens will be saved by pruning this out of the context? And in the end, we want to save the most amount of context while avoiding eliminating things that we actually need to carry forward. And there's going to be some additional information in there, little hints saying that probably the oldest content is the least relevant, except for very early content where you were given information about your role, the overall goal of what we're achieving, rules of operation, maybe where it read critical files that it keeps altering. So it's good to have those files in context, things like that. I'm going to add suggestions in there. Early content might include these things, so you wouldn't want to prune early content that has these important things, but otherwise early content related to old tasks that are long done, those are good candidates for eliminating. So let's get started on that. We're going to create a plan by following the planning guidance.md.doc. First, we need to align on the overall goal of what we're doing. First, read that doc. And I'm having it read that doc first because I don't know if it currently already has it in its context or if it has already pruned it out at some point. It didn't read the doc. What does it say? To align with your overall goal, I want to pin down the core user outcome first. Oh, it did read the doc. I see it right here. For some reason, I missed that. Okay, I want to pin down the core user outcome first before any planned format decisions. As type of user, I want to action goal, so that benefit value. Okay, share that in my own words. I've seen that the LLM has been making poor pruning choices. Our plan will update instructions to help the LLM make better choices. Before I talk about specifics, familiarize yourself with how the plugin works. Focus on the tool metadata that tells the LLM how it operates. Okay. While that's spinning, let's take a peek at this guy. It's going through the loop. Great. We probably won't need to bother with that ever, really, for this whole session, unless it finishes. But I'm expecting that to take several hours to finish, so we'll get back to that. While this is spinning, we can go to one of our side projects. So I don't know how much came through. I'll know how much came through on the stream, but my system, I probably ran out of memory and got really sluggish. That's some problem I keep running into. Not sure what happened. I forgot to go through my pre-stream checklist to make sure that there's enough memory to to work through stuff. So we'll see. For now, we're looking at the image to maze project. This is a tool where we feed it an image and we ask for it to make a maze based on the image. And the idea is we want, once the maze is generated, we should be able to recognize what the image represents based on just seeing the maze. And it works for simple stuff like, oh, I'm not sure any of these will work. Oh, SVG, SVG. Oh, I can't do SVGs yet. Well, let's start with a banana example. Here's a banana. And we can adjust the grid size of the maze. We can adjust how curly the paths are. And bringing this down tends to do the best. And you can start to see how it's kind of starting to get into the shape of the banana here. We can adjust the radius max, which is sort of how the sort of uncurliest parts of the maze are. Let's increase the grid size a bunch. There we go. And now you can see it's outlining the shadow of the banana. It's outlining the shadow, well, the shaded area of the banana and the shadow of the banana. And the table part here has some stuff on it that I'd actually like to go away. We can do that with the mask floor. I can bump that up until the table is not included. Oh, never mind. It's not the mask floor. That's for the shady parts. The mask threshold, I think, is what we want to be able to get rid of stuff that's on the table. Oh yeah, now it's only the very dark areas up there. Let's turn it down, down, down. So anyway, the last thing we did in the previous session is we created this GUI and we tuned it up a little bit. We added some features. Ooh, now I've really messed stuff up. Oh, because I went the wrong way, didn't I? Mask threshold, put it back at 1. There, now bring it down a little bit. That's already too low. Interesting. Okay, so there's sort of this hard border. I'm going to need to fix this so it doesn't change the height of the image every time you do something. The little thing that says it's busy working displaces the image, and that's unpleasant. Okay. So here's a part where it is avoiding some parts of the white table, but the shadier parts of the white table still get included. And one of the problems is that there are parts of the shaded area on the table that match parts of the shaded area of the banana, and there's not really a way to separate them. So let me see. I think I put in here what I want to do next. Create the GUI to modify various tweakable issues. That's what we have here. I guess I don't have what I wanted to do next. Oh, there's also some cleanup that had to be done because the orchestration process left some uncommitted changes and untracked files, and I had to clean that up. I think now I'm going to tell it we want to create a new plan, but first I generated a new image that we can play with here. So we have a doggy. Reset all of these controls to defaults. Oh, it cleared out the dog. Let's get this back. There. Okay, let's turn off the underlay image so we can see just what's generated. We need to invert it because on this one, where we don't want the maze is the dark area, where we do want the maze is the light area. So do this. And now this is way too coarse, and it's generating maze on the dark parts. So there's two things, well, there's a few things to do. The most important is bring down this radius. And now we can start to see it's getting squigglier close to the nose. Oh, and yeah, it also has this sort of non-linear thing where it just sort of collapses and is unable to generate a maze with certain combinations of settings. So that's an issue. We need to change the mask floor, which says if there are pixels that are less bright than this value, then we don't want it. So we're going to bring that up, and I think that did it. What happens if we adjust this now? There's something that at least covers the whole dog's face. Okay, let's maybe bring down radius max so that overall there's just more density in the maze. There we go, that's looking better. And it's sort of looking like the outline shape of our dog here. Let's turn on the image. So yeah, that's getting better. So this is sort of the result of the last few changes we made. We made this GUI and now we can tweak settings until we can start to see pieces of the image. And now we're going to have to take it further. Notice that the very lightest, brightest part of the image, the tongue right here, is very dense, has lots of maze stuff. And the darker areas are less dense, but there's sort of a sharp difference. This is very dense. This is very not dense. What we need is some way to make it so that the midpoint is not 50% gray, because most of the variation in the image is much darker than 50%. All of this outside part is way under 50%. So what we need is a way to sort of map the input values of the image to an output value of the density map. Sort of like if I was to change the brightness or the contrast in an image editing program. That's what we need. In fact, what I really want is something called curves. Photoshop, the GIMP program has a way for you to generate a curve, and that curve serves as a function that maps from the input value, which is the value of the actual pixel, to an output value. So you can take like the brightest areas and make them even more brighter, or you can take the brightest areas and make them make them darker, and you can kind of do that for different areas of the entire image. So that's what I want. That's what I'm going to ask it to generate a plan for. Now I'm asking it if it makes sense. I just want to get it to show me that it understands the tool I'm talking about and why I would want that in the first place. The OpenAI service, the inference, has been going up kind of slowly all morning long. So I'm going to let that stew and check back over on our plugin stuff. So what did I just ask? Oh yeah, it's making poor choices. I asked it to go familiarize itself with how it works. Okay. So we want some additional guidance. There needs to be some safeguards around files that are used to define operational rules, such as the planning guidance.md doc, but not by name. That's a general example. These should typically never be pruned. And those are frequently read in the earliest messages. But other than that, the earliest content is almost always the least relevant to the current task. Rather than prescriptively give it some stuff, I'm just going to describe the characteristics of how the things work. and the things to look out for, the kind of things that we want. And we'll sort of collaboratively come to a solution. I'm guessing it's going to think similar things that I think. Okay. So that's one issue. The other kind of file that may be read early. Actually, it's not even just file. It can also be instructions. Let me see. Files or messages. Operational rules. Okay. Let's say or overarching goals. E.g., we're improving this plugin rather than specific things, such as adding a particular feature. Okay. Or beefing up tests, whatever. A couple of examples. These overall goals and instructions should typically never be pruned unless the conversation has significantly drifted. Okay. And those are frequently in the earliest messages. Okay, other than that, the earliest content is almost always the least relevant to the current task. Okay, now I don't need this sentence fragment. That was about what I just added to the beginning. Okay, what else? Also, the latest content is usually the most relevant to the active task being done. Okay. The behavior I've observed is that the LLM will see the system reminder saying to think about pruning. Because the early messages, so one of the things that happens in the plugin is we inject system reminders. System reminders are little added messages to the end of the conversation. So when you use an LLM and you have a conversation with it, it builds up the context. Every message is appended to the end of the context, and that entire context is processed by the LLM, and then the LLM produces the next set of text, the response. So a system reminder is a special message added to the end of the real conversation, but that special message is typically ephemeral. It only shows up in one pass to the LLM. It gives the LLM the full context plus the system reminder, and then a response is produced, and then we have our existing content, and that system reminder that was added for the previous message that was processed by the LLM is removed, and further conversation that happens after that, other things that happen, not just necessarily conversation, but it can be tool calls that the LLM makes, or any, it's called a turn, that these things go through, where you have turns and you talk and the LLM talks. Another kind of turn is the LLM performs a tool call and then reads the results of a tool call and then does whatever its next action is. Those are turns. The system message is only included in one turn, and then in later turns it's gone. So there's little reminders that say your context is currently 45,000 tokens, about 11% utilized. Think about anything that should be pruned away. And as that utilization gets bigger and bigger, the system reminders get more and more insistent on things need to be pruned away. It becomes more and more important as the context grows. So what's been happening is the LLM will kind of ignore the earlier parts more frequently than not. It's just that the probability that it ignores it and doesn't prune is higher early on and less high later on. So the context does naturally grow. We naturally accumulate some older messages. And then when there is an urgent system reminder, the pruning happens. And it's been too frequent when it prunes something very recent, like the previous thing we just did, rather than something very old. And frequently, the previous thing we just did, even though we had some sort of transition from one task to the next, it's still part of an overall track of stuff we're doing where there was way less relevant stuff that happened much earlier on. So I have to figure out a way to communicate this to the LLM so that it understands. Um, Maybe I'll just kind of type out a long paragraph that's really boring to stream. Before I go typing that and thinking about that, I'm going to take a peek at the image to maze guy because it should be done. Okay. Here, remember, we're talking about the curves feature that we want to add. You want to add a tone mapping curve so the input grayscale X is remapped to Y before the density math. That's exactly right. Yep, okay. Practical MVP option, simple gamma slider. I don't want it to be a gamma slider. That gives me only one point of control. A 3-point curve, shadows, mid highlights would be fine. Maybe that's what I want. For now, what I really want is the full depth of the Photoshop curves tool, which lets you put as many adjustable points on a curve as you want and sort of bend the curve into any shape you want. That's what I ultimately want. But creating that UI is going to be lengthy because it's a complicated widget that you have to build. Whereas a 3-point curve can just be three little sliders. Oh, and it's suggesting the same thing. Start with a 3-point curve. Yep. Apply remap during that. Keep all existing density controls on top of the remapped values. Yes, if you want, I can. Okay. You are never to implement anything. I keep having to tell it this, and it's pretty annoying. The direct interaction I have with the LLMs are always planning and orchestrating, never directly implementing things, at least almost never. But the LLMs are tuned to be extremely helpful and they're ready to jump in and make changes for you. And that's been happening a little too frequently for me. And I'm really glad that it didn't jump in and create stuff, but it offered to. It shouldn't even offer it to because I've been giving it these instruction files that say you're not the implementer, you're the orchestrator, or you're the planner, and that should make it clear that I'm not asking it to actually implement stuff, but it still keeps wanting to. Okay, so I keep having to reiterate this: you are never to implement anything. We do want to generate a plan by following planning guidance.md. I probably don't have to tell it the 3-point curve is what I want. Since it gave me that suggestion, that's probably just what it's going to do on its own. I also want to remember that the granularity of radius min is not enough. Let me go here, add a note. Granularity of radius min in the GUI is not enough. 0.1 is not low enough. Okay. Okay. Great. It understands that it's producing a plan, and I think now it should go through the validation process of launching subagents and asking the subagents to review the plan. And each subagent kind of has its own responsibilities for things it's supposed to look out for. It launches 2 subagents, gets 2 sets of results. There it goes. Okay, that's going. Now back to thinking about this Context Bonsai instruction stuff. Okay. And ignore it. least early on. That's because it's specifically made to be less intrusive early on and more intrusive insistent later. That's a desired behavior, but it means that probabilistically there is a bunch of accumulated contents that is old. Okay, then when a more urgent system reminder comes, the LLM has too frequently chosen recent messages to prune instead of older ones, even messages that contain the exact current goal. Okay. Here's the aligned overall goal I'll use. Improve pruning guidance so the LLM preferentially prunes old, low-relevance context while protecting operational governance context and current task intent. I also tasks are kind of hierarchical. Frequently, larger tasks have subtasks or side quests. We need to be careful not to eliminate task instructions that haven't met their goal yet. Okay, let's keep reading. Preserve high-level anchors, operational rules, and overall session goals from pruning by default, unless the session has clearly and significantly drifted. Yep. Bias pruning away from away from recent messages, since recency correlates with active task relevance. Yep. Keep the existing gauge escalation behavior, yes, but reduce late-stage bad choices where urgent pruning removes currently relevant messages. Yes. And it gives us a draft user story, but if it's going to kind of restate that story down here, I'm not going to read it. It doesn't look like it exactly restates it. Okay, so in scope, guidance updates. Those updates include default protection classes, which are operational rules, overarching goals, age recency heuristics, drift-based exception handling, and in scope is a stronger decision order for candidate selection when urgency increases. Yes, stronger decision order. And my idea, which I put here, is to rank the prunable content. It's not quite suggesting that yet, but this is close. Out of scope is hardening specific files, names, docs. Yeah, we don't want to hard code specific things. Change core prune mechanics. Yeah, we don't want to do that. Alter desired lesson. Yeah, we don't want to alter the gauge like escalation. If this alignment looks right, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, in response to my last addition, updated goal alignment. Protect not just global anchors, but also active task hierarchy state, parent task intent, open subtask, unresolved side quest, pending acceptance verification steps. Yeah. Nice. Avoid pruning instruction-bearing content tied to work that is not yet complete. Yes. Prefer pruning completed or closed branches of work, especially older ones, before touching recent active branches. Yep. All right. I think I'm pretty happy with what this is saying. Let me do this. What do you think would be bad or good about getting the LLM to rank sections of the content text for deciding. Okay, I want to know what it thinks is bad about this. Extra token or cognitive overhead right when context is already tight. That's only a problem very late. Ranking can become performative if criteria are vague. Okay, sure. I don't care if it's performative as long as it's effective. Misclassification risk. Model may incorrectly mark unresolved subtask as complete. That's a risk unrelated to the ranking. Recency bias can still leak in unless explicitly penalized for pruning recent active items. There isn't really a penalized mechanism. Full ranking of all messages is too expensive and brittle. Right, the full ranking is do a coarse bucket ranking, not per message exhaustive ranking. Ranking is what I had in mind, but it's about contiguous groups of messages, not about type necessarily. Partition conversation into contiguous blocks, then score the blocks. Score dimension instructions, instruction critical content. Yep. Active task linkage. Active task linkage. Oh, right. If the current task is like linked to something else by being maybe a subquest or side quest or something. Completion status, open versus closed. Yep. Recency. Yep. Compression value. It came up with the compression value one, which is what I was already thinking, which is like how many tokens are going to be saved. Yep. Cool. Prune selection rule. Choose highest safe to prune old closed blocks first. Avoid blocks with unresolved instructions. Treat newest blocks as protected by default. Drift exception is only when the current task clearly diverged from earlier protected anchors. Yep. Okay. This also addresses your failure mode. Under urgency, the model should still pick older contiguous closed blocks, not goal-defining ones. Yes. Now, it could also, if there's an old contiguous block that has like goal-defining messages within it, it could just split up that block and eliminate the parts before the instructions and the part after the instructions, and then just leave the instructions there. I'm not sure I want to add that. One of the issues with LLM harnesses is that when you start adding lots of tools or the instructions for the tools become complicated, it degrades the overall performance of the LLM. This was mostly talked about probably around December, January, when MCP became very popular. Everybody created MCP everything to do everything. And then people started realizing adding all of these MCPs is consuming too much context. There were people that did research that found that instead of including an MCP, it's better just to have command line tools available that it can use and all sorts of stuff. But overall, the idea is that the more tooling you add in there, the less effective it is. So everything we add in has to have an outsized impact on the result. And I'm not sure if adding notes about splitting up those contiguous blocks is going to be worth it. Okay. The other thing is I don't want it to try to tell the user what it's doing. I don't want it to say, here's what the conversation looks like. There was a section about this and about this, and I'm going to rank these in this order. This is important. This is not important. I just want it to think about it and then do it. Yep, that works. Okay, great. You're ready to do the planning guidance.md process, I think. Okay. Let's check our image to maze guy. Let's see. I created a planning only story following planning guidance and ran the mandatory validation loop. Yep, it looks like it did that. Here's the plan file. What it covers. Fixed X piecewise linear MVP design with 3 anchors. Good. Oh, plus the endpoints. It's going to have 5 anchors, really. Shared validation contract. Okay, single remap authority. Yep. Yep, the worker must not remap just the main thread. That's probably fine. So this decision to do it in the main thread versus the worker is the trade-off is actually I'm not sure why it would want to do it in the main worker. The trade-off is anything it does in the main worker thread, that processing that happens, the CPU computation, is going to cause any other UI elements to sort of freeze. Nothing can happen while it's doing this computation. And because images can be quite large and it's doing like matrix math multiplication across this whole image, that could cause a noticeable delay in interactivity. I think I'm gonna ask it why it chose main thread versus worker. Let's copy this whole statement and see if it has a reason it did that before we tell it no. Identity curve compatibility requirement. I'm not sure what that means. Deterministic test validation command set and evidence tables. Yeah, that's fine. Validation loop outcome. It went through 3 iterations and resolved some stuff that was found in earlier passes. Okay. Let's talk about this. Why did you decide against worker? Doing this in the worker. 3 practical reasons. 1, single source of pixel truth in the current architecture. Pre-processing already happens in the main thread. There's decode, orientation, canvas luminance. Okay, sure, that's fine. Avoid double application bugs, fine. Easier identity baseline verification. You want identity curve to match current behavior exactly. That's the simplest to assert when remap sends next to the existing luminance generation code. All right, yeah, yep. Okay, seems like right choice. Orchestrate the plan. Okay, did I add... Okay, I want to add another to-do to our list over here, and that is that the throbber displaces, what was it called? Redraws the layout. We want a static throbber. Also, throbber should remain visible when things are stable. It should just switch between active, inactive, kind of like a browser does. Well, an old browser, a 90s browser. Come on. Okay. So there's our to-do list for things we're doing later. I should get rid of this. Delete that, put it down in the done section. Well, in old. I'll call it this old because some things may be done and some things may be abandoned. Okay. Okay. So this is going to go for a while, orchestrating the plan. Let's go back to this guy. This is iterating on the plan. Okay, since this is busy, we can jump to another thing, and I have another one here. What are we doing? Oh, I asked it to produce 2 plans, and it did. Let me just go like this. We need a new plan for updating the system. Use planning guidance.md. The plan must, 1, commit the previous changes. Oh, yeah. So as I've been working with the LLM conductor, things have been behaving slightly differently. There have been changes to OpenCode that have instructions that explicitly say don't commit. That's unfortunate. That means I have to counteract that in my plans and make sure that there's safeguards to make sure that as the plan is orchestrated, we are committing all of the work as it goes along. So in a recent streamed session that I did, I had something similar where it needed to have pre-checks for are there any tests currently failing? And if there are, record that in the plan so that when it gets to the end of the plan, it can't say, oh, there's some failing tests, but they were already failing. It can compare versus the recorded prior state of the task whether or not each test was passing or failing. And then the reviewer can review that and say, wait a second, you had 1 failing test, now you have 2. You need to go fix that. We need the same thing for commits. At the beginning, we need a table that records all of the untracked changes, the untracked files, all of the uncommitted changes, so that when it gets to the end of the task, if there's any new changes, it gets rejected and the developer has to revise things and commit those things. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Let's see. The plan must commit previous changes related to sub-agent reuse. Oh, also, I had it dig into those orchestration files to find out why it was doing some of this, and it identified other things too. One of the things was that there's some conflict or potential conflict in understanding the instructions of the orchestrator. In the previous streaming session, we updated the orchestrator so that when it does this developer reviewer loop thing that it goes through, instead of launching a new developer every time, it's going to reuse the developer. That's because I found that the developers can successfully use the Bonsai plugin tool. So because subagents can reuse the tool whenever it goes through the review loop and a revision is needed, that revision can be fed back to the same developer, and that developer isn't starting from scratch. It doesn't have to familiarize itself with the project and understand, what the entire plan is and what has happened and what needs to change. It already did all of those things, and it has in its active context what happened, what its plan was, what its goals were, and when the feedback from the reviewer comes through, it should have a better understanding of what has to happen to go forward, for one. And aside from the better understanding, it also doesn't have to reorient itself and spend a whole lot of tokens and API calls going back and forth, turn over turn, reading file, reading another file, until it gets to the place where it can actually start doing the changes that's needed. So those changes in the last one added some internal conflicts in the instructions, and this latest inspection identified that, so it's going to clarify some of that. That's one thing. Also, we're going to clarify some instructions in the orchestrator. The thing that I just complained about where the orchestrator is too eager to just get in there and make changes rather than create a plan, keep happening. So there are conflicts in the orchestrator saying it should never make changes to the project, but also I usually use the orchestrator and the planning document in the same session, and the planning document says specifically it should be writing plans, while the orchestrator thing says it shouldn't be modifying stuff. So that whole situation needs to be clarified, where the orchestrator may create plans if it's asked to, may modify plans, but should not be actually implementing those plans. So that's kind of what I told it to do. So now it has produced two plans. One is the orchestrator scope clarifications, include a required step to, oh yeah, another thing is now the orchestrator will, let's see. Well, it will never implement code, never directly edit implementation files, may read files for planning, research, and discovery, and may only write plan docs when following planning guidance. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. If it's going to be writing documents, it has to follow the instructions in the planning guidance. That's important. Okay. Adds explicit failure taxonomy. So it was, there are instructions in the subagent thing that says if a subagent fails, you can just launch a new subagent. But now that it's reusing the developer, there's potential for misunderstanding. If the developer completes something and then it goes to the reviewer and it says you need to revise something, is that a failure? It's not a failure. That's not what I meant. So it's going to clarify that. That's what it means here when it says a failure taxonomy. It's distinct from needs revision. And then adds a deterministic commit protocol and providence evidence requirements. That's the thing where it makes sure that at the end of a task, it's committed all of its changes. Okay, and then the other story, the other plan, worktree artifact escalation. Defines mandatory escalation when planned edits overlap. Okay, so this is one where during planning guidance, it produces a plan, it has the plan reviewed, and eventually the plan is accepted. But now, as part of that planning guidance, I want it to understand whether there are any files that exist with uncommitted changes, or if there are files that exist that are untracked in the Git repository. If either of those kinds of files are going to need to be modified as part of executing this plan, then it needs to tell me as part of this planning guidance stuff, so that before we start on that plan, we can figure out why there are untracked changes, why commits didn't happen, and figure out if we want to commit, if we want to discard the changes, or what's happening there before we actually have an agent go forward and do the plan. So that's this second one. So now I'm just going to have it orchestrate both of them. Okay, orchestrate those plans sequentially. Now I just want to make sure it properly is going to delegate the work to an agent. Oh, nice. It made itself a little to-do list. Good. This to-do list isn't exactly right because these first two steps can happen multiple times in a loop, and then these second two can happen multiple times in a loop. But that's fine. I think it'll still work right. Now, the subagent is reading the orchestrator documentation, which is a little bit concerning. Oh, no, because its whole task is to modify that file. That's fine. Sometimes when I tell the LLM to orchestrate something, it launches a subagent and tells the subagent to orchestrate something rather than do it directly. So that's what I was concerned was happening, but it's not. It was reading that orchestrator document because that's kind of the whole point of this plan, is to modify that document. So that looks like it's on its way and it's going to do the right stuff. Let's jump back to image to maze, still operating, executing its plan. Let's go look at the Bonsai plugin. Okay, this has come to a stopping point. Now, I don't remember what we just did. It created a plan. Okay. Implemented the planning process and produced a single story plan here. Okay. Plan type is single story. There's one story. Core scope, update the instructions surfaces, and those are the files where the instructions live. And lock behavior with tests. Ooh. I'm not really sure exactly how it's going to test that, but that's fine. Key dependencies, existing guidance injection and wording contract tests in there. Okay. Validation loop outcome. Okay, so when it did its own validation loop of the plan, it passed the missing details check. There are some unresolved ambiguities. So let's go over those. Remaining high impact ambiguity, how strict to make the drift dependency reclaim rules. No, we do not want a fully deterministic parser like rules, just pragmatic heuristic. Let me see it. Oh, and it is suggesting the same thing. Yep. We do want pragmatic heuristic contract, not strict parser rules. One targeted question, do you want us to enforce? Okay, that is the same thing. Locked in. I updated the plan to record that decision. Great. Okay. Orchestrate the plan. Something a little bit iffy about this is we are currently modifying the orchestration system. So as it reads these files, it may be reading incomplete edits from the other project, but I think it'll still work out fine. Well, it's asking to access an external directory. This is unfortunate. So this directory that it's trying to look at is the directory where the LLM conductor orchestration lives, but that directory is symlinked into all of my projects. Let me just double check. ls-l. Yeah, it's symlinked right there. So it should be using the symlink so that it doesn't have to ask permission. It used to do this way more frequently because there were instructions that told it where these files live. I'm not sure now why it's checking that location. It shouldn't be checking that unless there is no symlink. That's what the instructions now say. It now says there should be a symlink. If it doesn't exist, you can copy it from this other place, or you can create the symlink. Rejects. Oh, it didn't even... Usually when I reject, it asks for a reason. That's weird. Is it just stopped now? Wait a second. Are we in the right LLM? Yeah, that's where we did this. I looked there because of the project level instruction in my loaded context from this file that says the orchestration framework is there. Yep. And there should be a symlink to it. When asked to orchestrate, I must read the symlink. Hmm. So I had seen something like this before. It's saying that it tried to read this. Oh, it was using glob on the symlink, which probably doesn't work. That's interesting. So, well, no, the glob didn't work because I rejected it. That's not. Oh, here. Okay, so I might have to have extra instructions in there. This pattern of using glob instead of read is weird. I used glob out of habit to quickly discover the full set of referenced instruction files. Um, okay, continue, but use read on the symlink paths. Okay, now that I understand that glob is the tool that it's using when it causes that issue, I might be able to fix it. Yeah, the reading it directly works. Great. And now it's delegating. Let's go see what it says. You are a developer subagent. Perfect. So, yep, this is going to continue in the correct way. So that's the open code part. Let's take a peek at the image to maze. Oh, it finished with only one iteration. Great. So now we should have a curves tool. Let's refresh. Oh, this is different now. I like it having the full width of the thing. That's way nicer because the file path is um, frequently cut off and you can't see the whole thing. Here's the curves. Okay. Fine, fine. I'd rather have sliders with three little marker things in there, but that's fine. These are kind of grouped nicer now. Position control, oh, Poisson controls, curves remap, a whole separate thing for invert density, some overlay controls. Oh, that's weird that they're, oh, that's an underlay, not an overlay thing. Okay, fine, fine, fine. So now let's turn off the underlay image so we can clearly see the map. Oh yeah, it needs to be inverted. Invert. Now it needs to be way higher resolution by changing radius min. Let's put that way down. Let's pull radius max down too. And we also need to adjust the mask floor. It needs to be bumped up. All right, we need to pick a value. There we go. We need to pick a value where we can actually get a full map. What happened? Oh, there was one. Shoot. There. Okay. There. At least we have a full map now. Okay. So now we've successfully gotten the outline of our dog. And it's still very dense at the bright white tongue. And then the rest is more or less the same density. There's a little more density here and here. Let's turn on the underlay image. Maybe there's like a light shining from this side that creates a highlight here and maybe here on the right side of the nose. Let's go turn on the underlay. Yes. So this area is generally brighter than, say, this area, like the thickness of the bright. So this has a sort of a rim at the very edge of the ear, but this has a big old thick region here. So there's this part of the map can be denser. Um, let's see. I would really like this underlay thing to be a checkbox close to here so I don't have to scroll back and forth when I turn this off or on. Hmm. Can I just do that? Yeah. Off, on. Yep. That more dense area is directly right in that thick, brighter part. Okay, so now we're going to play around with the tone mapping stuff. I want the mid tone to be on the darker side so that there's in this general area in here, like the mid tone should be somewhere in the middle of these tones, not in the middle of the brightest versus darkest. So let's pull the mid tone down. Oh boy. We're going to keep getting this collapse. Maybe I should bump up the radius min to prevent that. Okay, there we go. Okay, that is getting a little nicer. Let's keep messing with the mid-tone. Overall, I really just need way more resolution. Oh, seed is not what I meant to do. Grid size is what I meant to do. Increase the grid size so there's more potential places to put the things. Okay, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. And now I can still see that the tongue is way more dense than the rest. I think maybe let's bring the highlight down a little bit. And I do think we still want the mid-tone to be down. And even the shadow I want to come down because the entire image is very dark except for the tongue. Let's bring the shadow almost down. Ooh, hold on. Let me turn on the underlay. That is interesting. Yeah, because there's a shadow here. And now that's just not present in the map, in the maze. Okay. Yeah, this tone mapping thing is pretty effective. Overall, I think we still just have general resolution issues. Oh, I want to turn off the underlay. Because even though it's nicely choosing the shadow and it's less dense here, you still can't really tell that this is a dog. I mean, there's eyes. There's, I would guess that's a nose if I didn't already know that that's the tongue. You can't really make out the nose. Let me turn on the underlay again. What does the nose actually look like? Yeah, we should be able to see the nose because there's a highlight area on the snout just before the nose. Also, there's highlight around the eyes. I would like to be able to make out, like, there's an empty space for the eye, and then there's a highlight area for the space around the eye, and I would like to see highlight around the nose. Okay, let's see if we can get there. Okay. For the highlight around the eyes. You know what? We might want a better UI. I would like to put a little eyedropper over the parts of the image and see where the tone actually is. I want to see where the original value is and where the mapped value is. And now we're getting to the part where we actually need the full UI. Okay, that was cool. So this 3-pointer thing proved the concept that we can get better results. We can start to see more definition and something that looks a little more like the underlying image. To push it further, I do want more control over the tone mapping. And specifically, I want to see the actual values in this image, both what the original is and using the current curve, what it will map to. So let's go. That's the next step. The POC is successful, but I still need more control. I want a full UI that shows the curve and axes for input output. I also want to hover over the image and show where that is on the curve. Now I'm hoping it doesn't go jump into implementing. I wanted to realize it's supposed to make a plan for this, not try to make the change directly. Because we've already done this a few times. It's already trying to read a file, so I'm not confident. Okay. Remember, you're not the implementer. One thing I want to note is that this, if you've been following along several streams, you'll realize that the title of the LLM session we have is SVG tangram shape samples for the house and snake. That is a thing we did long ago, way at the very beginning of this project. I think even before I implemented something, I already knew I was going to need some like basic silhouette shapes for us to test against. And we've done so much since then, all in one session without any, oh, I guess it did have to auto compact at least once. But even after auto compaction, we were still able to continue fine. Actually, come to think of it, I think it did compact once. And then I went and modified the plugin so that it calculates these numbers better. And I think I did a number of other things to the actual plugin. I changed how it operates a little bit. But I believe that I went and I opened the session and I rewound it back to an earlier message before it auto compacted. So for instance, if I go here, I can click on any message in OpenCode. Oh, now one of the most annoying things about OpenCode, it's not doing. One of the things you usually can do, oh, maybe I have to click on my message. There we go. It lets you revert back to that message, which will basically take the whole context and go back to the state it was when I wrote this message, and it will be as if none of the stuff that happened after happened. So I think the last time an auto compaction happened, I undid that auto compaction and got it back to the state before it auto compacted, and then I specifically told it to make some prunes that I chose. So yeah, this should still be the exact same session that we did all the way back when we created these tangram shapes, which is really cool. It's one of the entire reasons I created this plugin. It's been working continuously and it's still working. And when something goes wrong, we've been adjusting it to make it a little bit better. Which, speaking of, we were doing that over here. Okay, it's still going through stuff. Is this okay? And this is doing the planning guidance. Good. That means we can check on this guy, which, what were we doing? Oh, we were messing with the orchestrator system. And we created two plans. Now we had it orchestrate both of those plans. And there are some untracked files. They're all plans. Oh, one of the things I wanted to do was make sure that the orchestrator, if I ask the orchestrator to orchestrate something, then if the plan isn't committed yet, it should let me know and suggest committing it. I don't remember if I got that into the conversation here. Did our plans include having the orchestrator escalate if the plan isn't committed before it starts? Not exactly. Right, we did the dirty file tracking. That's different. Neither plan adds a rule. Okay, so we do want to add that. That's this to-do note. Okay, So yeah, we want another plan to make the orchestrator escalate if we ask it to orchestrate a plan that isn't committed. We also want the planning guidance.md doc to include a step for committing the plan once it's, well, I guess once it's approved. Okay, so it looks like it's about to write a plan file and go through the regular process of the planning guidance.md process. I just want to make sure that that's actually what it's going to do rather than directly modify the files. I did tell it we want a plan. Okay, it created the plan. Now is it going to do the subagent validation process? Yep, there it goes. Okay, so orchestrator thing is doing stuff. And at this point, we should have a cleaned up orchestration system that doesn't leave uncommitted changes hanging around between its tasks. That's good. Oh, what did I do? That's a subagent. Okay, I clicked into one of the subagents for some reason. Okay, this is going... Ah, this guy finished. What were we doing here? What did I ask? Oh, yeah. Okay, right. We were updating the rules for the plugin to help the LLM make better choices. That's exciting. Okay, that's just 2 iterations of one plan. Okay. Now I'm asking it if there are any uncommitted modifications that happened during that process. It looks good. I didn't. Okay, well, it's reporting there are uncommitted modifications, but I don't think that that happened during the process. Yeah, they were pre-existing dirty. Okay. One of the plans we recently generated was supposed to commit those, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I thought the one where I gave it a big list of like 1, 2, 3, 4, or that it needs to commit those. Maybe not. Not from the plan we just orchestrated, sure. The completed story only touched other stuff. Okay, figure out what commits the uncommitted changes belong to. I could have swore we just did this. And it said they're all related to a particular change that happened. And I could have swore I said we need a plan that starts by committing those. I don't know. That could have been one of the other projects. Okay, back over to image to maze. It finished creating the plan, theoretically. It did it slightly wrong. It launched a subagent to create the plan, and in OpenCode, subagents can't launch their own subagents unless they like use bash to launch a whole separate OpenCode session, which it doesn't usually do. Okay, there's where it created the original plan, and then the next step is to run the validations. So I bet validation loop outcomes. It did its own validations. It did not launch its own subagents. Okay. Okay, you didn't quite do that right. Weren't supposed to launch a sub-agent to create the plan because the planner must itself launch sub-agents, which is not possible. You're supposed to be the planner, so you can launch the sub-agents. Now, treat this as though you've created the first draft of the plan and launch your sub-agents. First, reread planning guidance.md. All right, interesting. It's doing an auto prune, or it's doing a prune. It figured out things that it needs to remember before it prunes. That's good. If it's going to prune away some context and there are things within that context, the instructions say that you can just reiterate the things that you have to remember out of that context, and then you can prune it away. And that way, the information is now here in the context here, and it won't be in the old location. User requires planner role to be done by me directly. I must reread. Okay, sure. Existing plan file is here. No direct implementation. No past key process issue. I must stay orchestration, planning, disciplined, and avoid direct implementation. Okay, good. It's going to remember that stuff. Cool. And I did give it like these operating instructions, and it specifically said it needs to remember that. So that's awesome. That's what it's supposed to do. I wonder what it pruned. It started from you are never to implement anything. We do want to generate a plan, blah, blah, blah. And it ended with, where's the end? Okay, you didn't do that quite right. Oh, my very immediate message. Oh, this is an example of a poor pruning choice. It pruned pretty much the most recent message. Yeah, the most recent message. It pruned a whole bunch of stuff leading up to the most recent message. That's a poor pruning choice. That is what we just tried to fix and what we just did. Since that happened, I'm going to go ahead and restart OpenCode right now so that it loads the latest version of the plugin. So quit. There we go. OpenCode dev continue. Do not get the recent. Okay. Great. So now we're loaded. We have the same session. The thing just happened. But now its pruning instructions should hopefully avoid that exact thing. Okay. Do you understand? Okay, it actually pruned away the exact thing that I just wanted it to do. So I literally told it, let's see. Now treat this as though you've created the first draft of the plan and launch your subagents. And first reread planning guidance. It pruned this instruction away and it didn't record that it was supposed to do that. So that is actually a problem. Oh, well, no, not exactly. I must reread the planning guidance and run validation agents by myself. Okay. That you're supposed to reread planning guidance and do the validation step next. Okay, very slow responses today. Now it's reading the file, that's good. And it's using the wrong path again. That's very strange that OpenCode stopped asking me to tell it why I'm rejecting an operation. Okay, let's peek over here. Okay, what did we most recently do? Figure out what commits. Oh, yeah. Map to the earlier source commit. Enforce canonical archive key only. Make a new commit. In the commit message, say that this should be a fix-up for, oh, come on, for that. Okay, back over to image to maze, and it is doing the one of the validations. It's supposed to do two different validation things. Okay, and what was happening over here? The last thing I asked, another plan to escalate if the plan isn't committed yet. Okay, yep. So it created this plan. Orchestrator must escalate and hard stop if asked to orchestrate a plan that is untracked or modified or missing. Defines committed deterministically. Okay, la. The validation happened and it passed. Okay, yes. Before we orchestrate, I'm going to restart this so it gets the latest version of the plugin. Oh boy. Disable. There, I need that. And then I need OpenCode dev continue. Nope. Delete that. There it is. Okay, yes. Orchestrate. There we go. And this one committed its thing. So I think I have restarted image to maze, and I've restarted the LLM orchestrator agent, but now I need to restart this one. Let's do that. First, I think it's going to be this. See if we get the same thing back. I should have paid closer attention to the most recent message, but I don't think... Oh. Yeah, no, that's a different session. Let's try without this. That's the one. Okay. So what I've been doing here is there's an environment variable, and what this does is it changes which session database is used. So one of the recent changes to OpenCode is that there are now multiple session databases, and there's one database per release channel. And when I'm working from the development OpenCode, from the OpenCode version that I've built myself, it's on a development channel. It's specifically the channel is hard coded in the code somewhere that says this is the whatever the name of the channel is. So it uses the database for that channel if I don't specify anything. If I use this environment variable, then it disables the specific channel database and it'll just use the normal database. And I thought that I'd been working on the normal database, but apparently I am working on the developer database. So launching it without that environment variable was the correct thing to do to get back this session. Okay, so theoretically, I think we're done here. Did we accomplish anything? Adjust plugin instructions to rank prunable content. Yes, that all completed. Okay, so Context Bonsai stuff is done. We began this whole session by, oh, look at that, by having this go through the loop to figure out the meta plan. What we want is a nice meta plan that lets an agent rebase the OpenCode modifications on top of the latest OpenCode continually. Like anytime there's a new OpenCode, it should be able to rebase our changes onto the latest without any issues. So I had it go through this loop where it was adjusting the meta plan, producing a concrete plan, and then orchestrating the concrete plan. And if there were any problems in that process, then it learned from it, made new changes to the meta plan, and started the whole thing over again. So it seems that it's done. I expected it to go longer. Let's see what it says. Restored the working tree baseline for this loop, updated the meta plan. Yep, with the new things that it learned, reran the validation loop, and the plans passed. Generated a new concrete plan, good. Orchestrated the new concrete plan and observed problems. Initial execution surfaced governance, provenance, schema drift issues. Ran revision loops until the issues were resolved. That's not what it was supposed to do. Then evaluated the metaplan effectiveness. The final concrete cycle reached. Technical seal pass, governance seal pass, final ready true. Judge approved as is. I don't think it understood the loop correctly. From your report, I don't think you understood the loop correctly. It looks like you had issues. Let me see. Restored, updated, reran, generated, orchestrated here. You said that. And then you just continued pushing the dev loop around to get the concrete plan working. But since you had this issue, it means there's still more to learn and change for the meta plan. Ooh, it's going to prune something. Now I'd like you to go through this loop slightly modified. It should not have pruned that. That's what we're actively working on. Jeez, guy. I'm pretty sure I didn't restart this one. Shoot. Okay, hold on. Stop. Nope. Go back to here. Maybe first copy this in case it... Fine, copy it this way. And then revert. Good. Now I'm going to restart this. Oh, man. I still need to figure out how to get VI editing commands in OpenCode because this is annoying that you have to just do this. All right, there, now quit. And then restart OpenCode. Try that way first. There we go. That worked. Now let's see if it makes a different pruning decision. I'm going to paste the same exact thing in there. Oh no. What? Oh, get rid of that. What? That is not the most recent thing I copied. Oh, here we go. That's what I need. Okay, let's see if it makes a different pruning choice now. It's thinking longer, which would make sense. Oh, it didn't prune, which may mean, right. So that system reminder that tells it to do stuff pops up on every 5th message. So I think what happened is previously, right after that command, it was the 5th message, and that's when it saw the system reminder, and that's when it chose to prune. But now, because I restarted, that message wasn't the fifth message, it was the first message. So there might have to be a few more back and forths until it sees the reminder that says it should prune. I treated this as another meta plan iteration, not just concrete plan patching. It's saying it agreed, but then it's saying the opposite of what I said it looks like happened. I made the meta plan changes to directly address the execution defects you called out. Okay. Let me see. There's the devlog. Yep, it did do something about a plan. Here's the concrete plan stuff. It's re-reviewing concrete plans. What's it doing here? Meta plan step 1 missing details. Generate a new concrete plan. Execute the new concrete plan. Review the execution of the concrete plan. Okay. I need a clearer timeline of what you did. You're contradicting yourself. Okay. We had an initial meta plan and started testing it by generating concrete plans. A concrete plan was generated and orchestrated. Instead of fully feeding those findings back into the meta plan first, I let the concrete dev loop continue too far in places. That's fine. We then did a meta plan hardening pass and committed as is. You asked for another iteration loop where I then generated a new concrete plan, orchestrated execution, collected defects again, updated the meta plan again, and then that's it. Okay. I see. So, yeah, you didn't continue the loop. If you've made new changes to the meta plan based on the previous failures, then you are not done with the loop. Remember, I said to go until the concrete plan can be executed without problems. Okay, great. Hopefully that just continues. Plugin work is done for now. We're just modifying OpenCode now. Peek at the image to maze. It did a missing details check. Okay, it's not really doing the full planning process. It's supposed to just go until it's done and there's no issues yet. I don't know why it's stopping. Hold on. Do you understand that the planning guidance.md instructs you to have multiple kinds of reviewers? That's first of all, because it didn't even do that. At each iteration and to continue iterating until the reviewers give you a pass. Okay, it looks like it's modifying the plan, and hopefully it continues in the normal, correct way. I think this planned target files thing might be something new that was just added in the things that we changed on the orchestration system as part of the checking to make sure that the files that we expect to be edited aren't uncommitted, don't have untracked changes or whatever. I think that section is new to deal with that requirement, but I'm not completely sure. Oh, and look at that. It launched 3 kinds of validators. I didn't realize that the instructions said to use a whole separate subagent for that. Interesting. Okay, I think that's going to continue correctly. Now this is the, oh yeah, this guy's just continuing. So again, like I said at the beginning, I expect this to go for hours um, until it's able to produce a concrete plan that can be executed without running into problems. And this one over here is done. I think we're ready to end today's streaming session. We're kind of at a holding point on the 2 active things, and we more or less completed the 3rd thread that we were operating on, and it doesn't make sense this late to start yet another thread. Ooh, this one finished. And theoretically, these guys passed all the checks. No blocking gaps, no unresolved ambiguity, no overlaps, no escalation. Okay, theoretically we're good to go. Now orchestrate the plan. So there, that's going to orchestrate. So that means on tomorrow's session, we should have a new curves UI for playing around with adjusting the tone mapping so we can hopefully get some definition in this maze that we can actually identify as features in the original image. We'll see. Now, as a reminder, this whole thing, it's not strictly like I don't care that much about this tool. The main thing we're doing here is trying to do something with the LLM to have a really long running session and just test the Context Bonsai plugin and make sure it works as expected. And we did see some weird behaviors, and we went and updated the Context Bonsai plugin, updated the instructions to help the LLM choose better things to prune. I wonder if it ever did prune. It's at 56%. I suspect it has not pruned since we did the since we undid the previous pruning and gave it the new plugin. Yeah, I don't see any recent prune calls. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on the next prune, because the most recent one, it made a very poor choice. And it's the exact kind of choice that we attempted to fix today. So that will be interesting to check in on tomorrow. And yeah, hopefully by tomorrow, we're going to have the meta plan that's able to keep OpenCode up to date, to keep my changes applied to the latest version of OpenCode as OpenCode evolves. And hopefully this image to maze project has a nice, cool UI, and hopefully it has done at least one additional prune job so that we can evaluate how the new instructions affected its choice. All right, thanks for joining me. We'll come back tomorrow.